Yes, if you don't mind, that'd be great. Good morning, committee members and other parties of interest. This is the evaluation committee meeting for RFP 25-00293 Disaster Recovery Management Program. My name is Ethan Kersey, and I'm the senior buyer assigned to this project. This meeting is being held in part by means of communications media technology and has been publicly noticed. Active participation will be for committee members only. Provisions have been made for any member of the public desiring to have access to view the meeting. The recording will also be available after the meeting has ended. If you are watching online today, please make sure you mute your microphone and turn off your camera for the duration of the meeting. Please be advised that the cone of silence is still in effect. All meetings and correspondence must include me. Again, for the record, this meeting is being recorded and has been publicly noticed. At this time, I'll ask each committee member to introduce themselves for the record. You know, with the committee chairperson, Rob Hendrickson.
Sure, Rob Hendrickson, Management and Budget.
Lauren Storage, Water Resources.
Irma Muka, Management and Budget.
Deborah Benavides, Enterprise Solutions and Quality Assurance.
Audrey Ziegler, Social Services.
Cheryl Howell, Community Impact.
Sarah Wilkes, Human Services.
Thank you. On September 12th, 2025, the county received a total of 10 proposals in response to RFP 25-00293. However, the proposals received from Construcciones IMD LLC, Integrated Solutions Consulting Corp., and the Well Incorporated were deemed unacceptable and will not be further evaluated. The evaluation committee chair will lead the discussion on each of the remaining potentially acceptable proposals, including how the proposals correlate to the requirements and evaluation criteria set forth in the solicitation, the methods utilized by each committee member in their evaluation, and the desired outcome of today's meeting. So with that, Rob, I will turn it over to you to start the discussion.
Sure, Ethan. Thanks first to the committee members for all your time and for all of our vendor partners out there who did a lot of work on these proposals. In terms of our process, you know, the overarching theme here is we want to be methodical, take our time, do good work here, and make sure we evaluate these proposals thoroughly, fairly, and really comprehensively for the benefit of what will become a strategic program for us and our community. With that in mind, today's focus will be, as you said, Ethan, for each of us to explain our method of assessing the proposals, the relative merits, and some of the weaknesses of those proposals. We will not score today because we will, in fact, be following up with a round of oral presentations that gives us the opportunity to add some texture and context to what we received in the proposals, but more importantly, to ask questions where the proposals weren't as specific as we would have wished. So those will be scheduled at a later point in time. So today's meeting will likely not last the full duration by virtue of it being as I described. But I think it will be important for us to share our thoughts, given the fact that these proposals are significant and there's a lot of content in each of those. So with that in mind, I think we could probably start by maybe each of us describing our approach to assessing these, and then I'll take one at a time with all of you for facilitating the conversation around strengths and potential drawbacks of each. If we can start with you, Lauren, and go around the table.
Sure. So what I did was I kind of had at the top of my document each of the criteria that were included in the proposal so that I kind of paid attention to each one and how much mention was allocated to each, what each firm chose to emphasize. And a huge undertone to all of it was how much mention there was about what role the county will play in this whole program. So that was sort of my approach. And each time I would kind of reference whether or not they mentioned something specific, whether it was sort of glossed over, how much emphasis they placed on each thing, how much detail they went into each item, since that was really what was forming the basis for assigning points with each criteria.
I followed a similar approach, focusing on the key components of the proposal and just ensuring that they had thoroughly responded to each of those components. And I also paid attention to which, I mean, a lot of them said they had CDBG-DR experience, but some perhaps handled just specific portions or specific programs during certain engagements and not a complete set of programs like we're looking to do here, someone to manage our entire program. So I summarized information based on each proposal. And after I went through all of that, I looked at potential scoring.
Okay, so ditto to what you've already heard, but I'll add that I did focus on the level of detail, how easy it was to follow the proposal. I feel like that would directly correlate to other deliverables that the proposer would give us. Their experience with the size and complexity similar to our project, as Irma was saying, all of the tasks, whether all the tasks were included and the detail that we needed to assess them was included. The overall resume experiences matched to the roles that they were going to have, and maybe their experience with the tools that they were going to be using. The qualifications of the subs, their experience with the subs. Also for the work structures, maybe the level of detail on those work structures, how they would work with county staff, how they would roll out, the different tasks. Their methodology for reporting, specifically for controls. Not just that they have controls, but what are those controls and how are they going to be used throughout the project? And their level of experience with rolling out a project of our size, and do they have the framework in place? Or, was it something more that they were going to be putting together specifically for our project? So those are the areas.
Good morning. So what I was looking for was substantial CDBG DR experience and what those number of years look like. Also maybe realistic timelines for some of the work to be done. Some of them were quicker than others, and just trying to see if they work quicker, if that would be realistic to how these things could roll out. Are there local connections, willingness to offer in-person support, not just remote access? And I think they all pretty much were willing to or already have a presence here. What would the case management system look like? And overall, just a full comprehensive look at what the overall program would look like working with the county. And then I also went through and looked for weaknesses and, where I thought they would be flexible with us, maybe pivot when we needed to pivot, because this is going to be somewhat new to the county as well. So we want to make sure that the partners will pivot with us and provide that support to be in tandem with us. Team composition and what their technology platform looked like, and then overall the teaming partners, what those partners would look like as their teams work with our teams.
Cheryl Howell, I focused a lot on the qualifications, experience, and the capacity, as well as their methodology. And so, I looked at them not just as one entity, but as a team, the team that they were bringing together, and the vast amount of work that they may have done with this particular team or with similar teams. And then I dug a little bit deeper, right? Because many of them referenced the different areas that they were working in, or localities that they were working in, to look at how successful those projects have been, how whether or not there have been major incidences in some of those areas, or where they are in spending. All of this is public information. We can find it out. And I also looked at their methodology and how they would roll those programs out. Was it easy to follow? Even when I looked at their costs, right? So some of them, their cost was a lot easier. Some of the disasters have been on, in the major newspapers. Have they had data breaches? Have they had debarment issues? All of those things matter, especially when we're going into an opportunity like this to work with not just one firm, but typically several different firms. And last but not least, I looked at the capacity and how they might be able to serve and dedicate people to our team, right? And not just start off with a good high level person, but to continue that throughout the process. So oftentimes you'll get a vendor that'll come in and they'll identify a set of people that'll work with you. But when you start the work, they'll send you their junior team into work. And so we don't want that either. And so, you know, I'm looking for dedicated people at a certain level that can help us deliver what we have to deliver in a reasonable period of time too. So I thought that some of the timelines were pretty aggressive, actually unrealistic. So those were things that I looked at.
I concur with all my colleagues here.
Mhm.
I generally look at, do they have the ability to, undertake a project of this size? Some of the organizations I felt, although they identify that they work in project this size, when you drill down, they'd only done certain elements of the project. We're looking for a fully comprehensive project from nuts to, start to finish. I also believe that some of the capacity in some of the organizations in relation to their subcontractors would not be resilient enough for what we're looking for. I also looked in terms of the resumes and their CDBG DR experience overall, and whether they followed the actual element evaluations, what we were looking for. Some of them did not follow the actual criteria. They did not clearly identify the criteria. And as Debbie mentioned, some of them were easier to follow than others. And that's what I was looking for.
Okay. I'll go. For qualifications, capacity, and experience, I considered scope relevant capacity versus total head counts of the firms. By that, some proposers would say they had 35,000 people, but the reality is they have a huge sub that has about 1,000 DR people. So I looked at that. Each proposer's value proposition, how can they articulate why they can help us better than the competition? Clarity around teaming. I specifically look for direct experience and qualifications for each of our tasks with a priority given program management, compliance, single-family housing, and infrastructure. When I talk about a direct experience, I pay particular attention to the exact roles being performed. For some of these, there were words used that made it somewhat difficult to know exactly what a firm did. For example, they might have said they administered a housing program, but did that mean they actually owned it end to end, or did they do staff augmentation, or did they provide the case management tools? So that's, A, knowing that's important, and B, clarity around that was important to me because it can obfuscate their true delivery capability. To do this, I used a scoring approach by which I assigned 25 points across 12 criteria, with 1s, 2s, or 3s, depending on how important those earlier components I mentioned were. For the methodology section, in this case, I assigned 70 points against 36 requirements, 13 general that were tied to our RFP, and 26 across our 10 tasks. So those were basically the components under each task that we requested, with some being more important than others. For the general requirements, I look for information that address program task sequencing, right? So a lot of approach to some of your comments earlier has to do with how are they recommending we mobilize and how are they recommending we sequence? And is there anything in there other than everyone starts at the same time and we can get it done in 3 months? That was a kind of common theme. That's not realistic, nor does it take into account presumed priorities of ours. So that's something I considered. I also looked at county and proposal roles and responsibilities, echoing what you said, Sarah. It's important for consultants to hold their clients accountable and make sure we know what we need to do for them to be successful. Proposer organization structures, did they make sense? Were people named in those organization structures? Was it clear what they would be doing at some level of detail? Because my experience is when you have vague roles, you get vague results. So that's something else I considered. Lessons learned, key success factors, good deliverable descriptions. Again, that gives us a sense of what we're buying here. I also scored, to the point some of you made, the clarity, organization, and specificity of each proposal, as well as the quality of each proposal in terms of careless mistakes, because in my opinion, this is a work product. And I'm evaluating the firm based on their ability to convey information correctly, have it be information that's valuable to us, and have it be well organized and clear. And there was a big range, as some of you have said, in terms of that. For task methodology, I rated key task components requested in the RFP. For example, within the housing task, I paid particular attention to call center capabilities and case management technologies. And to your point, Audrey, another thing that I was interested in is, are they coming to the table with configured assets that we can use? Because we've been through this before. Or is it just a blank slate and we're all doing it the Hillsborough way? I'd rather hit the ground running with every artifact, every deliverable, every technology, even call center to a point, so that we can A, take advantage of best practice, and B, benefit from speed, which we'll need to do based on the fact that it takes a while to get to this point. So that's also something I paid close attention to. So that was my approach for this. Any questions amongst the team about each other's approaches? I think we're all pretty methodical, which I think will pay dividends. Okay, that being the case, let's move to, and I'm just going to pick an arbitrary order. This doesn't reflect any rankings. Like I said, this will be more a discussion of relative merits. Maybe we can start with qualifications, experience, and capacity, and start with any of the group's comments related to the proposal from Horn. I'll just quickly kick it off. I think Horn has some pretty extensive experience in this area. They're one of the big players. We know that, particularly around housing programs, which are complex, have a lot of policy requirements, HUD requirements, dealing with the public, dealing with contractors. To me, that's an area that's essential, but also one that's going to require a lot of capability. I think Horn brings a lot of experience to the table there, which I think is valuable. Other thoughts on Horn and the qualifications, capacity, and experience?
Seems to have a lot of presence in Florida, which is helpful.
Okay.
I'm worried that they may be stretched to capacity because they're already working on some projects in our local areas as well. So I know that's mentioned that there was staff available, but I'm just, worried that some of these, I think some of the members were mentioned working on other projects locally.
Right, and I think for the most part, most every proposer indicated that everyone on their team is available immediately. I know for me, a question that maybe we cover later is explain how exactly that's possible. If they're strong performers, they're assigned to projects. So we want those folks versus people on the bench. So that's a conversation we'll eventually have to have. But I share both of your thoughts around capacity there.
I wanted to know a little bit more about Canopy. It looked like they have their own system.
Mm-hmm.
So the other ones were utilizing Neighborly. which is
Yes.
More familiar platform. We've had good luck with customized systems, Rob.
Yep.
So I wanted to hear a little bit more about that. If there's an oral
Okay.
opportunity to describe more what Canopy can do functionality.
While we're talking about qualifications, this is just general, I think, we want to maybe dig into their case studies that they mentioned and their, experience in terms of projects of the size that we want in terms of the qualifications as well.
I think we also want to look into, dig a little deeper into, not just the case studies, but in areas where they work, right, and look at, actual accomplishments. And so everybody's gonna paint themselves in the best light. All of them say, hey, I'm Superman and I can do all of this. And so, which is not the case. And so, Horn is a very respected firm, and they're doing a lot of work from the state level down. They're doing work in California, Hawaii, in Texas. I want to say they're out in Harris County. Some of these areas are harder to deliver in other areas, period. Right. And so I think that it's a little bit, for me, suspect when I look at them and they say, oh, I have it all together when we know that they don't, So if I look at our partners down in Lee County, and these are applicant-based programs, right? I want to say they have and it's been more than 3 years, 300 houses that's been delivered, right? And so, those are things that we kind of have to look at. And we have to also understand that they're applicant-based programs. So you need the community to apply to these programs. Oftentimes, it is not the fault of the administering agency, but things are happening in this space, right? So it was some issues up in West Virginia with Horn, right? And they were kind of big issues, that all of those things kind of, I want to say, need to be brought to light so that we can have a better understanding of what's going on, especially as it relates to our relationship with HUD, right? Our ability to stay compliant, and our ability to be able to manage these things so that the commissioners stay somewhat happy and that we're delivering good products. So I do have some concerns there, but Horn is a very respected company.
How about anyone on this side?
I did see in their proposal that they serve as a technical assistant for HUD since 2023. So I thought that shows HUD's confidence in them.
Mhm.
I saw that as a positive.
I want to speak to something Cheryl just said, that these proposals, I mean, they really do paint these firms in the best light. So I paid a lot of attention to how much emphasis they put in the lessons learned, because I feel like that really shows insight and the ability to reflect on things that went right, or more importantly, things that went wrong, and how they can kind of be proactive in future program administration. Horn, they had something that I thought was particularly thoughtful in their lessons learned about weaving compliance and pre-award compliance checks into program design, which I think, I mean, compliance is probably one of the biggest hurdles with this, the administration of this program and the amount of money that we're going to be administering and managing.
Mhm.
So I think that thoughtfulness in terms of saying, hey, this is something that we've recognized an issue with in the past, this is something that we're going to strive better towards, in the future. Thought that was really, that was insightful.
I agree. And just one more thing, when we're working with organizations that have a proprietary system or own their own systems, there's a level of risk in that as well, especially if things go left. Right, and so then it's hard to then get your information. It's a lot of negotiation that has to go on with that. And so most of the other proposals had like a partner agency in that, like a Neighborly, and that is that's a software that we've used throughout the county. That many departments are currently familiar with. So I just wanted to add that.
Just a quick counterpoint to that, and Debbie, I'd like to give you a chance, but while we're talking about it, I think the technology is really important.
Mhm.
My experience is a little bit different, just based on what we went through with Ernst & Young. They supported us. They jumped on board when we did our COVID CARES Act launch. And remember, at that time, we had 8 or 9 months to spend $256 million. In fact, they worked with us on the platform that was used for our small business program, by which we administered over 90 million, in our rental assistance program, which at the time was, I think, 35 million, but has since grown with subsequent phases. I think you're right, Cheryl. If that technology hasn't been vetted, proven, and used, and what I would argue to the next step of that is what I saw, because I also worked with you and Neighborly when we did the work for, I think it was the daycare centers. I think Neighborly gives you solid basic functionality, but at least my experience with the Ernst & Young platform, that gave us a lot of bonus functionality that proved to be super essential later when it came to a lot of the finer details that matter to the way we make decisions, record decisions, and report. So they've since taken that platform and grown it to a point where it's gone to a number of major clients. I think I know that one, so to me, that's a unique asset. I don't know the other one, so I would also want to know more. So I agree. It's essential, because once you're locked in, and also goes to our earlier point, is it configured already or not? I'd like to see that it's 90% configured and we just tweak. But Debbie, your thoughts, and we can talk about Horn writ large, I think, rather than go quals and then go back around methodologies. Okay.
I thought Horn had an overall solid submission.
Mhm.
They had extensive experience, and I think when it comes to the tools and the software, really the structure, for companies that have that type of experience and that many clients, and honestly, the case studies they gave us, they're very relevant. There's like an economies of scale where they're gonna develop something that crosses all of the areas that we need internally. So I agree with what you said, Rob, as long as they've got, you know, the good tools and the good structure in place, they're not, you know, being made on the fly for us custom, you know, that's really what we need to know. And, you know, they had, and another thing that I looked at was how many key staff each of the companies identified that they were gonna have be on this project. And, you know, some of the proposers said they're yours, pretty much full-time, except for their training or whatever. And Horn had, you know, 30 key staff, 25 prime, 5 subset, was good. So yeah, I think they had an overall.
I think their proposal was the easiest to read. I want to say that. I think that was an asset, except in the methodology section. There were a couple of times I felt like in their interest to try to get a really succinct, punchy section, there's a layer I was still looking for to learn more. As opposed to several of the other proposals that really took more time to articulate their approach and the details behind it, whether that be, like I said, deliverable descriptions, roles and responsibilities, how they feel we should sequence things. But from the perspective of just getting an understanding of scale, qualifications, that one was an easy on the eyes read. So I appreciated that. And I think it spoke to some clarity around how they go to market. Any other thoughts about Horn?
I made a note on my sheet that they developed an interactive GIS tool and won an award. And then the other thing they made mention is that they had Hurricane Katrina experience. I'd like to see how all that fleshed out as they do the verbal.
Yeah.
I got my references. You may, yes.
I'd like to summarize my reference checks. I've never called so many people in the span of an hour and a half, but I made friends, so that was nice. But I will make a general comment about references that surprised me. I found a few things happening. One is some of these references, if not Horn specifically, I'll get to Horn in a minute, but just so that everyone knows what I learned. Some of these references didn't work there anymore. Phone numbers weren't active anymore. In some cases, the prime contractor didn't specify that the reference was for a sub. And in some cases, the sub before it was named what it is named today. So I would call a reference and I would say company ABC, and they say, I have no idea who you're talking about. Then I would go look at the subs and maybe we'd land on one. They say, oh, that one, yes. So I was underwhelmed as a rule across the board with the diligence placed in the preparing of our references so that they expected our calls, so that they were accurately depicted in terms of working there or not, and in terms of their phone numbers. My approach to references was to call every reference at least twice, giving the benefit of the doubt. I called everyone on Friday. I called back on Monday indicating I had an end of Wednesday deadline. And as we go through each, I'll tell you what I learned. So Horn provided 3 references. I'm not going to name them by name. One gave, well, I guess I can say exactly what happened, right? In terms, so the reference for Lee County, I didn't talk to the assistant county manager. I talked to someone else for feedback. They did cite pulling from a large bench, which is important because we're going to have turnover. And a large bench allows for more flexibility around needed skill sets, or if we don't have a match on the team and we need a replacement. They said to make sure we have a clear communication process and touch point for problem housing clients. What I mean by that is if a housing client has issues or complaints, make sure we know how those get funneled. I asked 3 questions. I won't repeat this part, but for the benefit of the group, I asked 3 questions with a 1 to 5 rating. One was the firm's ability to structure projects and programs and complete them successfully. Another was their ability to partner, collaborate, and communicate. How they would rate the firm's overall disaster recovery knowledge as it applied to their situations, because some were DR-ish. And then how would you rate their quality and attention to detail? They got strong scores from that one reference. Now, let me say there were two others. The contact for Puerto Rico, I couldn't reach. There was no voicemail, called twice, and the one for Broward, bear with me. He didn't know porn or what they did there. So I just mentioned that as a rule. I do think this also represents, like the proposal, their overall attention to detail, making sure we have easy access to these people. So that being the case, any final comments on porn before we jump to the next company? Go once, go twice. Okay, let's talk about our overall feedback with Tetra Tech, and I'll let anyone volunteer to start that conversation. And we're done now. I mean, I can start real quick just to get the ball rolling as you guys look at your notes. Again, as I'm looking at things, it's how I did my scoring. I think in the housing area, they were a notch or two below some of the better proposals, so I didn't give them full scores there. Also, I would say, and we made this point earlier, I will expect the lead of every major area of our program to have specifically done what it was in our program. And in single family, I saw a gap there where there was emergency management experience, but no housing experience. Those are not the same animals, and Charlotte, you know that for a fact. So that was something I considered. And also in terms of qualifications, I'm looking at scale too for their infrastructure experience. That wasn't quite what some of the others were. I'm just going to make general comments and then let you guys jump in. I was looking for a little bit more around how we would mobilize. I thought they had a solid proposal, not quite at the top of the heap, but not at the bottom either. Reporting tools, I felt could have used more information. I don't know that there was a lot there, and I think that's essential. Some of these proposers have tools that aren't just being used for case management. As we said before, they could be used for a dashboard to collect all of the data we care about around infrastructure, around financial management compliance. I just didn't see much there from them. Again, going back to case management and call center, I really want a turnkey call center. I got a feeling from these guys and others that they're going to stitch something together with a couple of people in the back office. So I'm not trying to be cute, but the fact is that's all I could glean from it. Whereas others have massive call center capabilities. The reason that matters is you can't underestimate the importance of rigorous processing behind the scenes with call centers, data collection structures, staff who are trained in managing complexity. You can't just put anyone on a housing program call center. We saw it when we were doing our work. So that was something I looked at across the board as very important. It also turns down the temperature because we're going to have people who aren't all pleased or happy. And then lastly, one of the things that we said would be our first priorities is really around helping us vet our projects for our infrastructure projects. We have a preliminary list with a lot of good content. I want to know more than what we told them we needed when it came to helping us make sure we were good on damage tiebacks, LMI compliance, if we're using any kind of rubric for prioritization. I want to see more about that because, we've already done a stab at LMI. We've already done a stab at benefits. We really need someone who can strategically get to that for us quickly. So I think I've talked enough about Tetra Tech. You guys jump in and let me know your thoughts.
I can just piggyback. I noticed their experience matrix excluded our tasks 1, 3, 4, 5, and 9, which were important. They were heavy on admin and policy and compliance training. He really needed the details on the implementation, similar to what you said, Rob, and their case studies, it was minimal info. I wasn't really sure if they were similar to ours, but based on their experience matrix, I would assume not.
I concur with both Rob and Debbie. I just saw these huge gaps and maybe they just missed the part of it, right? Like I was, like did they not read the entire RFP? Because it was So, but I think it's important that we not just look at Tetra Tech, that we look at that their entire team that they work together. But I still believe that they didn't flush out, their ability to be able to deliver on a lot of our needs. So I wasn't at all impressed.
And I can just add on that from my understanding that Elite were not the prime for some of the projects. They were basically one of the subcontractors. They were not actually leading some of the projects. So that would go against, in my opinion, being able to demonstrate the experience conducting the projects for size and complexity.
I thought their case studies, they presented one large case study, but then the other ones they presented were quite small and non-comparable to the Compass project. If they had this type of experience, I wish they had picked better, more comparable case studies. But otherwise, I agree with everyone else's comments.
One thing I'll add is they mentioned a few times in the proposal that they're an engineering-based firm at their core, which is very helpful in terms of permitting and delivering infrastructure projects, but doesn't really speak holistically to the needs of what we're looking for in this prime contractor. Another thing that I thought was interesting and spoke to me because of my primary role is they mentioned aligning the planning activities with kind of slating for other grant requirements, which is super forward thinking and very insightful. But one of the programs that they mentioned has actually been defunded. So I thought that was kind of a little haphazard that they didn't pay a little bit more attention to detail with that.
And I also think that, based on the information that they gave us, it really depicted how they are primarily emergency response as opposed to disaster recovery, which is
It's a good
best.
I have to say, we work with Tetra Tech on the public assistance program. That's the Compass vendor for that type of work. I mean, they're fairly new, but they are knowledgeable in that field with public assistance.
Okay. Any other thoughts on Tetra Tech before I give you a summary of the reference checks? Okay. So Tetra Tech provided 6 references. 3 did not return my calls. Even one had a wrong number and he didn't return my call after he used the right one. So another didn't work there anymore. A 5th was out of the office, so that's fair. And then we did get one review from a woman who worked for Monroe County. This had to do with a buyout grant management program. On the 1 to 5 scores, that they get 5s across the board on the main strength. It was advice and clarity guiding complex policy decisions. It said the program manager was phenomenal, prepared, thoughtful, and patient. In many cases, when they really liked a given experience, the weakness that I followed up with a question about were kind of watered down weaknesses, but in this case, the weakness was really only that arriving at contract language is a bit challenging, and there's nitpicky was the word used. So I don't know if that's a weakness or not. In any case, the final question I asked, would you have chosen them for that engagement if you had it to do all over again? And they said yes. So one reference check out of 6, largely due to no response back to me for that one.
Monroe, where's Monroe?
All right. Let's move on to Ernst & Young. That's okay with the group. I'll just start again just to keep us moving. So I already mentioned, and I'll do this for 2 companies based on my direct experience, Ernst & Young and Indelible. Ernst & Young was a strategic partner of ours when we most needed one. And although we ran into some pretty big bumps along the way because we were standing up a capability no one had ever had before, their collaboration, partnership, and strategic counsel was really essential. And when it came down to it, right, because we were all working crazy hours, they delivered for us. I think what I like most about them is honestly their culture as a company. To a person, they're helpful, thorough, flexible. They just were, they're for me, a good example of what consultants should be. And they continue to be that as we had to deal with refined treasury reporting and expanding the use of the system we mentioned. They've just been a real asset to us. So that being the case, in terms of looking forward to this, I would say that I'll start with the most positive. I thought their methodology section was the best. Yes, there was a lot of content, but if you actually read it, there's a lot of value in that content, and they provided more than just a regurgitation of what we asked for in the RFP. I mean, there's that proposal by itself is an asset if you think about it. Really read it and pay attention. So I thought their methodology was the best. On the qualifications, I think the fact of the matter is Ernst & Young in the infrastructure and housing space isn't quite where some of the others are. But they've done a lot of other similar programs they can pull from with respect to managing application processes, knowing what eligibility criteria are. Program management's an asset there, policy and compliance is something they already come from based on their history. I thought they had pretty good partners. But the fact is, I think they're moving into this space, and have done work that's very close to what we need, but not quite what we need in terms of the level of qualifications that some others have just happened to have done. But I do have faith in the firm, and I think they're a strong contender. So those are my thoughts on Ernst & Young. Anyone other thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you, Rob. Having firsthand knowledge working with them for 5 years now, I think the existing relationship may provide some efficiencies for us, already knowing their key players, having that rapport. I apologize for the bias, but I can't unlearn the experience I have with them. They absolutely have a proven call center with volume control, which was huge. And the system includes a generation of payment, which was a huge challenge for us working with how does the system get to a payment platform. I don't know if that's going to be housed elsewhere, but they worked closely with our clerk's office. With every layer of the organization, they were able to deliver from the customer to the final product. Duplication of benefits was addressed, multi-languages, helping us with closeout reporting. And I could read between the lines because I know them. So even though there was some gaps missing compared to Warren's proposal, I feel like I know them well enough and have a comfort level, confidence in their work that I know they would pull through for us. So.
And some of their key staff, like Manisha, will be actually on or guiding it, and there'll be others. And it is caliber and quality of the bench polls, as I mentioned before. I mean, I have a bias because I come from the consulting way back, but when there's benefit in some of the size and sophistication of a firm like that, because you get resources who just can hit the ground running. That doesn't mean the others don't necessarily. Right. But there's a benefit to that. And we saw that where we had, some turnover and had to manage it.
But just for an example, though, we did have a couple of their staff that weren't a fit for the project, and they were immediately replaced so they heard us and they pivoted quickly. And those were game changers for us.
Yeah. Other thoughts, comments? Betty? Sorry. Shoot my glass last time.
Maybe by design. I thought they had one of the best laid out proposals, without a doubt. It was easy to follow. They had the most key staff assigned, and it was pretty well split between them and their subs. So where they were maybe not as experienced, they had strong subs. I thought the case studies were spot on and very detailed. And again, like I said, they had well qualified subs. And again, their case studies were thorough and comparable. I thought they had a solid submission.
Thank you, Laura, since I cut you off.
No, you didn't tell me. I was also impressed with their methodology and approach section. I thought it was pretty robust. I liked that their approach seemed to really reflect a strong understanding of our action plan. And I felt like that was going to be able to mesh well with our organization and really foster some cohesiveness. I also liked that they had they made mention, excuse me, about identifying programs that'll be over, under subscribed to and assisting the county in understanding what allocation changes need to be made. I thought that was really helpful because that allows them to step into that consultant space that we're gonna need of, hey, this is working well. Let's continue to, keep this moving, or this one has some gaps. Let's either try and fill it, or let's try and shift some funding around, and then being able to advise on some of the amendments that we may need to the action plan. And really just be able to streamline, helping us administer the program. So.
Cool, thanks. Sarah?
I agree with my colleagues. I like their crosswalk of where to find stuff when you're looking through the RFP, which made life very easy with some of the size of some of these documents. I agree with their bench staff. What I liked about them was that they actually had deputies mentioned. They had their original prime member and actually a deputy. So that's good for us in terms of bench staff, I think, and having continuing staff on the project.
And I agree, for the most part with what everybody has already offered. I just want to say that, I don't believe that they bring the kind of strength that, let's say a horn, brings, to the table. But they have great partners. And because of the relationship, with the county, because of the positive relationship with the county, I think that's a real plus. They kind of delved into some areas that were interesting to me that I know we're going to need some serious support on. So I believe that the partners will help fill in those gaps where they primarily don't have. So
Cool, thanks.
I also agree with everyone's comments. I felt their proposal was the strongest. It read and flowed very well. With their proposal, and from what I know for the firm, they're well established. They've handled large amounts of HUD funding in the past. Their key staff, I thought, was well experienced and educated. They proposed a large number of staff, I think 37, and all experienced. I also thought their partners bring specialized capacity. They have a local presence, which is a plus. And they're financially stable with strong revenues and strong credit ratings. I thought their organizational structure and experience demonstrate that they have the capacity and capability to manage our project. I think that's all I have for them.
You mentioned the action plan. One of the things I was a little disappointed by is how few use the information in our action plan, even in terms of the allocation amounts, right? And I would also say in terms of prioritization. When you look at how much money is in housing and infrastructure, I was surprised that those things were given more preference. And that's also been a theme amongst our board for many months. So I'll just make that comment. Going to references for Ernst & Young, they, bear with me, big spreadsheet. So this is one where it would have been useful to know there were subs involved, but once I sussed out that, I had that at the ready. So I did manage to get through to all of their references after that point. And scores were on those 1 to 5, basically a 5 going across all of them. When it came to some of the positive feedback, I already mentioned my feedback, and I did use myself as a reference because I was allowed to. But ran a turn, I'm not going to get into hyper detail, just ran a turnkey operation successfully, great communicators. That had to do with Aegis, the sub. Eisner Ramper, superb accounting. Also, they work effectively with procurement financials. Same sub was cited as having an almost zero. It was like a 1.32% fraud rate, which happened to be extremely low for a given program. They were aggressive about chasing fraud, accessible and good at structuring big programs. This person talked a little more. Also good at preventing duplication of benefits and would find solutions before they would come to the client with issues, which I like, and everyone in the world. Depth of knowledge. This has to do with Mercury, which is a sub focused on outreach and communications. Depth of knowledge and the knowledge of our region. And then finally, this was EY as a sub to Aegis. Quote, so many good things, approach is thoughtful and comprehensive, brought a lot of value, understand the landscape, have the foresight and knowledge to run the program. That would happen to have a construction focus. They were a collaborative. If I were to summarize, 4 of them didn't have any negatives. One mentioned they worked through their differences. It wasn't anything to speak of. And, you know, our experience, the only thing I could think of, we did have to circulate a couple people out. And in the very early stages of working on that grant platform, and I told them this, you know, their graphical user interface design wasn't quite what I expected, and we had to iron out some of that. But those are nits. So that's what I got for reference for them. Like I said, I managed to get through. That was the only company I managed to get to all of them and speak to, but that could be accidental. I don't know. Okay, great. Let's go to the Guidehouse now, if we could.
Before we do that, we are probably about halfway through our conversation. Someone, does anyone need a quick 5-minute break? We could keep going.
Good. That's good.
What?
I can wait.
Okay. Are you sure?
You want-
It'd be a great time.
You want to do a 5-minute?
We can.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
Let's do it.
because then we have guilt feelings.
It is
5-minute break.
9:51. We'll be back about 9:56 or so, everyone. Okay, we will resume the evaluation committee meeting for RFP 25-00293. I think we're about to discuss Guidehouse, correct?
Correct. So we've done Warren Tetra Tech, Ernst & Young, we're on Guidehouse now. I believe, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, in talking about qualifications, I believe there's only one. There's decent construction management creds, but only one housing program. And again, you guys disavowed me with that. So that was something that to me was a detractor on the qualification side. On the methodology side, there were several areas where I wanted to see a little bit more. I'm just going to summarize those. So in predominantly in the single family housing space, I wanted to see more on how policies and procedures would be developed. Some of the best proposals actually outline these documents, which was helpful because you can call it whatever you want, but if it doesn't have what you need, it doesn't do what you want it to, so to speak. I also looked for in single family, I wanted to see a detailed intake and review process because that tells me they know what they're talking about. And this one was very high level. So that was to me a matter of degrees that I cared about. Any mention of neighborly, I wanted to see some clear, very, very clear language that this thing was ready to go with tweaks as opposed to, we've done it before and we're going to configure it from scratch. Wasn't really sure if the call center was turnkey or not. And then I didn't see much at all about planning assistance and then moving down to infrastructure. I was really looking for more detail around how we would rack and stack our infrastructure projects. I meant before, and I didn't see any mention of LMI or damage tiebacks in that detailed task section. So again, it's with many of these proposals, it's most everything was mentioned, but how far did they go? And I think they were light in those areas or didn't quite give me enough to see the details that told me they had a full picture of what our requirements are. So anyone like to go second on Guidehouse?
I actually like Guidehouse, maybe because they have a lot of housing experience. And so have colleagues that have worked and interacted with them as well, especially during Sandy and the whole disaster recovery. And Sandy lasted for a number of years. But I do want to make a point about Neighborly. I was at ICMA last year, and Neighborly had this huge demonstration on disaster recovery. So they have like this whole team around disaster recovery right now. So I think it's a lot different than what it was when we were working with them. But yeah, I thought Guidehouse had some really good experience when it came to multifamily. A little bit light on infrastructure, but I really appreciated what they could contribute toward single and multifamily.
Just add one other thing. I made a note about change management and how they could easily change the scope or program modifications. Wasn't really mentioned too much of how that would be handled. So again, just knowing firsthand, having your hands in a project, how important that is. Maybe it's there, it's just for the elaborate.
I noted that the engagement partner has only been with the firm for 3 months, which kind of was a little scary for me. I also thought it was a little peculiar that in the stability section, they were mentioning how there's been multiple acquisitions over the 7 years that the firm's been in operations. Doesn't necessarily translate to stability in my perspective, but maybe that's slanted. They mentioned having a tier system for assigning risk to subrecipients and how they would sort of delineate between the level of training that the subrecipient might receive based on that risk. I personally feel that us and all subrecipients should be on an equal playing field in terms of how equipped we are to manage a program at this level. I mean, the county's never received an award of this magnitude, and I think that there's a lot of training that we need in addition to the subrecipients. So I thought that was kind of interesting to mention. But overall, I thought it was a good proposal. They definitely had a lot of relevant experience, and seemed like adequate staffing.
I'm gonna go next. I thought that with their proposal, they've shown their ability to stand up large projects and have institutional ability to work over large time spans, starting with Sandy and continuing to support efforts in Sarasota County with more recent disasters. They provided a good number of case studies for Guidehouse and its partners. The key staff they proposed, I thought it was a good number of staff that they proposed, and they were experienced, somewhat evenly split with their subs. And I thought their proposal indicated they have financial stability, large number of employees. So they would have the capacity to deliver this project and scale up as needed. Those are my thoughts.
And they were the one that I was least familiar with. This one, so I'm kind of surprised.
I concur. I looked at the length of time that they had a relationship with their sub-recipients and noticed the same thing that Lauren did. One of the things that I would have liked to see more information on is basically about their compliance expertise. I didn't see a great lot of information in there. Maybe it's just me missing it. I would like to see a lot more information on that. I don't think it mentioned CDB, GDR, technical qualifications in depth. That was from my own personal findings on there. What else? Other than that, they demonstrated the ability to manage projects. I just don't know whether I could find out whether they were the sub or the prime in some of those though.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Sarah said and Robert with what you said. In a lot of the areas, we were missing the details to really fully evaluate if they were going to be able to run with it. And a lot of their case studies were more on the sub side, and they weren't across the board projects like we had. Ditto to it.
Yes, anyone? One thing I failed to mention, because I didn't scroll over this, I couldn't find where they, and I think theirs was the only one. Tell me if I'm getting it wrong, we can talk later, but I couldn't find where they laid out what they needed from the county. So in some cases it was a dependency, in other cases, like one for every deliverable. It's like what the county does, what we do. I didn't see anything on county roles, and that to me was an oversight. Let me get to the references for these guys and let you know where we ended up with them. They provided 5 references. 2 were unreachable. And 1, there are only 2 references across the board where individuals were uncomfortable giving any feedback at all, other than to say that they work with them.
Rob, was Sarasota?
I even tried all of my wiles and I could.
Sarasota County one of them?
Yes, and that's one who did not get back to me.
It looks like they currently have
Right.
project with them.
I even have the same phone prefix, so I thought that might have helped me with Sarasota, but it didn't. I got through to 2 references, and they did receive perfect scores on the 5 ratings. The 2 positives mentioned were knowledge base regarding funding sources and being able to navigate and organize the effort, and deep knowledge of DR and use of funds. Stood up everything from scratch, worked well with staff, and said, quote unquote, they're one of the best. In terms of challenges, one mentioned there was some turnover, that was a challenge. And there was just a small, because I kind of forced them to give me something. At one point, there was an OIG audit. Back then, they required hard copies, and Guidehouse was a little reluctant to do all the fun lead work of pumping out probably thousands of documents, but they relented it. So that's a small weakness. So that's what I have for Guy House.
Would you, well, that's a separate question, would you be able to update the scores for that chart if they do get back to you?
Well, I said-
Assuming some people may still call you back.
I let them all know that Wednesday was my deadline, and after which I wouldn't be accepting any.
Got it.
I did receive one call after, and I used it in my personal scoring, but I didn't refresh the overall
Just curious.
sheet, and no one else has called me.
Okay. I was just,
Um,
no, I didn't know if we need to keep monitoring that.
No, I mean, maybe I'll start hearing from people weeks from now and wonder why they're calling me. One other thing to mention before we go on to elite business strategies regarding our orals is Horn is in the process of being bought out by a large accountancy called BDO. I want to understand what that's going to mean to their company and their capability and their ability to focus on clients. So that's just an FYI if you didn't know that. That was brought to my attention by one of the references, in fact. So let's move on. Elite business strategies is the next one on my list. And honestly, from a capacity standpoint, I think this is an area where they just don't have the depth or breadth that the other firms do. They have a 15-person core team, reach of another 450 so professionals. In the financial section, they mentioned they have an office supply branch that keeps people busy when they're not doing DR work, which I thought was a strange marriage or mention in a proposal of this size. As far as the quality of the proposals go, I struggled a lot, but particularly in the methodology section, because what they did, they didn't break it down by task. They smushed all that task stuff into about 20 matrices. And not only that, I found it to be very jargony. And it was hard for me to know what it was they're really saying about each of those components. Not in every case, but as a rule, when it came to the proposal quality, I put them, I really felt like they were bottom of the barrel on that. And it was made it really hard for me to actually even apply scoring. I read that probably 4 times. It made it difficult. That being the case, I just don't think they have the qualifications and capacity of the other firms. And like I said, when it came to the methodology section, almost every task I was looking at, I felt like I was wanting more. It was very salesy. It just didn't give me a lot of meat to kind of grab onto and understand how they precisely do it. Those are my thoughts overall on elite business strategies. Anyone else like to jump in?
This one was the lowest on mine. I mean, I know we're not talking scores today. Just limited evidence of managing things of this scale overall, which was the same thing throughout. There were some good qualities, a real-time dashboard. But their timeline seemed aggressive also.
Yeah.
Maybe not doable.
Sarah.
Yes, some of the issues that I noticed was with one of the agencies and the leading partner in that agency. It seems that a lot of the proposal was built around the experience of that one person, and I couldn't actually get that. When you look at one person's resume, it was not in line with the actual time that one of the actual awards was made and that they were working on, which is their biggest award. And they only had one award with capacity at this size for projects. What else? I think so. I really like some of the lessons that they learned. They are kind of, but they were kind of nice, but they are kind of standardized things that they actually learned. But I think they did put a lot of work into that section of the proposal. Other than that, I just didn't think we had a good, strong mythology in this and how we were going to move forward with the project.
Okay. Sure, thoughts.
I concur. So they, I read this, it might have been 2:00 in the morning. So seriously, so I read it the next day, the next morning after I just wanted to kind of get a good feel, and not feel like maybe I'm frustrated a little bit. And so I just felt like a lot was missing. And I think that they might be able to come in and do some small parts of the, come in as partner agency or stuff, but they're not ready.
Or,
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point, but it seemed like a lot of their experience was with smaller counties, more rural, not much comparable to our size and the magnitude of this award. Another thing that kind of struck me, I think Audrey, you were maybe touching on this, was they mentioned simultaneous launches, which I didn't think was really on par with where the county's at with some of our programs and kind of the timeline that we're anticipating with some of the components of this program. And I didn't think there was much mention of integrating county roles and kind of the collaborative approach that I think is going to really be required for the success of this program.
anything to add, Debbie?
What everybody said, I just didn't see anything in the proposal that they could actually run a project of this size and scale.
Yes, I actually could not locate resumes for every key team member. Just a handful of them they provided resumes for, so it would be nice to have seen their experience. I thought with their case studies, they presented just one large case study, and then the other two were much smaller and not comparable to the county. And then I thought throughout their proposal was high level with limited specifics, more theoretical. Their technology platform was not clearly described. I was not able to see a specific vendor they're proposing to use. And then, as everyone else said, I could not locate much information on the specific hand deliverables that we were looking for them to respond on.
I think that's everyone for this one. Did I miss anyone? Okay, great. All right, two left. We have ICF and indelible to discuss. Let's, oh, I'm sorry. All three of,
He's just trying to keep it linear.
just go down there. Yeah, you,
Keeping you accountable.
next time, good elbow or kick. Maybe I didn't think of it because all three of their references didn't get back to me. So, cool. Saved it, saved it up. Okay. Let's discuss ICF and then we'll end with indelible. So ICF, from a qualification standpoint, I think they were solid. In the example that was provided for the infrastructure work, I was a little unclear about what their role was. And I think their IRMA work was significant, but I believe that was the main one that was significant versus multiple. On the methodology side, on the general requirements, I thought they were pretty good. The one thing I would have liked to have seen more of was theirs was another case of everything starting at the same time. I didn't want to see that. I wanted to see something that accounted for the reality that it's just not feasible, right? We have priorities, and there are longer lead times in some of these things. Moving down, I thought their program management and compliance was solid. Within the housing area, I had a few reservations. The intake process was very high level. I needed some of these things, I couldn't tell, like with call center, if it was truly turnkey or not. Many times with call centers, the proposers kind of just took our language and told us they would do it. So I wasn't sure what that really meant in terms of, what are your staffing levels? What are their skill levels? Where is this going? They're just, I think some of these firms are going to stitch that together after the fact. And I felt like that maybe was the case here. The construction management, I wanted to see a little bit more of. So that's where I went, but I think they had a solid proposal. It's just, they fell short in a few areas. And I'll wrap that up and let Debbie start this one with ICF.
I'll pass. I agree with what you said. They had a solid proposal. Just a few, maybe a couple concerns from a risk perspective. I noticed that it mentioned their executive program manager is currently leading all the CDBG, DR, MIT projects. So then there's the bandwidth on that. ASCO was just awarded and, is that gonna impact maybe the resources? And just the case studies, one was similar to had 4 of 9 tasks and one had 5 of 9 tasks. It's my differences from what you said, Rob.
Okay.
One of the things I noted, was that they will have a dedicated team, 100% dedicated to our major projects. And I thought their timeline was pretty good. Pretty detailed. They were at the top for
Cool. Irma.
I agree with everyone's comments so far. I thought they demonstrated capability to manage large-scale projects. Their key team was experienced. I think they presented good case studies. They have a local presence throughout Florida, which is a positive. Otherwise, I thought their commitment to being on the ground and in person may provide for better coordination and responsiveness.
Lauren.
I thought this was a strong proposal. They had good section for their lessons learned, specifically noted about how with the Lee County Board needing to get approval on things and figuring out ways to streamline, which is definitely going to be something that we'll have with our program administration. They mentioned treating compliance as a critical path, which I think is can't overstate how important compliance is going to be for this whole thing. They also mentioned starting closeout on day 1 to avoid delays with gathering documentation, which kind of falls into the same bucket of just how important compliance, documentation, and for auditing and all financial records. They seem to really understand how our county board structure was going to be set up. They mentioned about going to the public meetings. They mentioned about the stormwater plan that was just completed and kind of incorporating that and using that to address critical gaps or emerging needs. Just seemed like they had a pretty solid understanding of the county and what our priorities are with respect to this program. So
Thank you. Sarah.
Yes, I agree with what everyone said so far, compliance especially piece. I was, as Debbie mentioned about the fact that they have, been awarded PASCO, and I'm wondering whether that's going to limit their capacity to be able to assist us with their bench strength. One of the things that I did like was that they mentioned in their technical qualifications that they're HUD's longest serving TA provider. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if you know, Joel, but yeah. What else? I think one of the things, it's just minor, but on page 5, they had the Florida Department of Management Services versus Hillsborough County mentioned there, which was just a minor thing, but just sense attention to detail. Other than that, that's probably about things I've got.
Thank you. Sure. What are your thoughts?
I thought ICF had a strong proposal. They actually are HUD's longest TA provider. Them and I won't say they actually were one of the first disaster recovery teams too. They served Katrina before we ever even had disaster recovery. So they're steeped in NDR. Their relationships with HUD are very, very strong. Their presence here in Florida, though, is a little bit wonky to me. So they've been here for a while in the Tampa Bay area, and so we haven't had a whole lot of interaction, but some interaction, of course, in the last year or so. They did recently have a grant with the city of Tampa, and so we may. I'm not sure if you want to follow up, or if you can follow up to see how that went. We haven't done any work with them directly, but I thought their proposal was strong. I believe that their compliance, ability, capacity is maybe even stronger than any other, of the other submissions. So that's my take.
Did we get it? Debbie, did you go?
She started us off.
Debbie started.
Yes, it's done.
I'm multitasking here.
I'm easily forgotten. Oh, like it that way.
The other thing is they're the only proposer, who mentioned the Black and Beach report, which I thought was pretty impressive because of how important that is to us.
And they were at all of the community meetings.
Oh, they were?
I just want to say that. I feel.
I know that Delville was. They provided six references. 4 I was able to reach. 1 I couldn't reach, and another person couldn't remember the role. On scores, 3 perfect 5s, 1 somewhat lower, average of 3.75, so 4s and 3s. So here are some of the positives. Subject matter expertise and compliance monitoring, willingness to take on more to help the prime, overall knowledge of DR, but also policies. They added value and they help think things through with fresh perspectives, knowledge and expertise of federal guidelines and programs, and accommodating, always fit me into their schedule. On some of the things that were constructive feedback. All this person mentioned that some of those 4s and 3s could have been relative to their role as a sub, and that the prime may have been causing some of the problems because everything flowed through. Another person said they would have liked a little bit more in-person support. A third said nothing negative, and the 4th said that not every team member shared the same sense of urgency, and a few deadlines were missed. So that's the feedback on ICM. Okay, let's move to our final term, Indelible Solutions. I think for me, in terms of the proposal, organization, quality, depth, I struggled a little bit with this one too. Not as much as the EBS one, but I did struggle a little bit with this one. I could not find, so in the general requirements, I could not find any critical success factors. I became a master at, searching words just to make sure I was fair. I couldn't find any of those. That was a requirement in the RFP. There was another, bear with me. Again, and I couldn't quite find anything about how they would monitor team performance. That could have been a miss because some of these are embedded in odd sections, right? And knowing how to find them. And then the org was based on, the org didn't take the people and put them in boxes. So I wasn't really sure who was going to do everything. It was more just generic. So those were a few things around that. What else? I think they're leaning on their subs more for some of these qualifications. And I didn't see as many qualifications around infrastructure, planning, multifamily. So again, just some areas where in economic revitalization, I don't think I saw anything there. I do think the proposal made clear, and I'll talk about my experience with them on the action plan. I do think it made clear they cared about our community and they're very vested in it. And as a segue, so Indelible is the company that did our action plan work. I do think, again, it was clear they cared about us and our community. They attended all the community outreach meetings, but the actual process for getting our action plan done was fraught with a lot of careless mistakes and errors. Sarah and I went through, I think, eight full reviews. In almost every review, we caught things we had previously reported as needing to be fixed. And there were some cases where there was information where, in particular, there were tables that were really hard for us to understand. We asked, why can't we do it a certain way? The first answer we got in one case was, this is what HUD requires. And then we heard later that they actually talked to HUD and agreed our way was better. So I don't want to put too fine a point on it. But for me, there's a question in the references, would you have selected them to have done that work for you again? I cannot say that I would. And a number of their key folks on that are also listed here. So I'm just sharing my experience. I wish it were more glowing, but for me, that does factor into my ultimate decision. I'll hand it to you, Sarah, next, and we'll go around the table.
Okay, so some of the questions that I had here were relating to the experience managing projects of similar size. My understanding of what I read, and this was not the easiest document to find. I didn't find it was laid out succinctly to follow. It looked like most of the work was done by their subs that the subs, and they were, as you know, they weren't the prime, was the subs leading and they were assisting. So to try and work out whether they could actually do a project of this capability, I don't know. Not all bios and resume, there wasn't a resume or a bio of the people mentioned in the actual RFP. What else? Yes, I wanted to see really what actual Indelible actually did. You know, was it the compliance, was it the case management? Some of the other proposals laid out, they did full bench or the full remit in a nice matrix format. This wasn't succinct to find out that. And I didn't see them actually managing construction or housing or actual infrastructure projects. So that's my findings on it.
Mhm.
I'll go next. So if the call center appeared to be, I always look at this from the day to day and how we're gonna live it. The call center appeared to be relying on AI, which I don't love. I'd rather have the human touch to answer questions and walk people through what they need to do if they're contacting a call center because they need some hand-holding. This may not be as transactional as an AI call center. May not have an experience with a project this size. They said they had a strong boots on the ground door-to-door campaign, which I think is relevant immediately following a storm, but may not be as relevant now when we're this many months beyond. People will have technology and other ways to access them. Again, they mentioned DRC experience and DSNAP experience, which is very relevant immediately following a storm and could be a feeder to the program, but this far out, I just don't think it matches. But their timeline did seem realistic and had a good approach.
Mhm. Yeah, I think they do have a lot of disaster recovery experience, not disaster recovery, emergency response experience as opposed to disaster recovery experience. I did like their timeline though, so I thought that was really good. They are leaning on a lot of their partner agencies like HGA. HGA is particularly strong in infrastructure, done a lot of work in infrastructure and disaster recovery. I thought it was a solid proposal. I think they got some weaknesses, but I think they got a strong team.
I personally feel like the fact that they were our partners in developing the action plan should have kind of postured them in somewhat of an advantage in terms of their methodology and approach. And I didn't really feel like they kind of capitalized on that. They mentioned, you know, the public hearings and their attendance there, but I didn't feel like they really extracted some valuable information that was probably ascertained through those hearings of, you know, what the community was sharing and how they would kind of implement those suggestions into the actual approach. I did like, they mentioned their strategic partnerships with nonprofits to help connect with residents. I thought that was really thoughtful and kind of speaks to what you were talking about, you know, just caring about the community. And you can tell they're really embedded in the community and in the state. But I just didn't get a lot of the specifics that I was looking for in terms of how they're actually going to, you know, help us administer this program.
Thank you.
Yes, I thought overall they had a good proposal. They have experience as a firm. The key staff was significant, 32 individuals. However, most of those seem to be subs, coming from subs. I did see they're proposing quite a few partners. I'm not sure how the coordination will work among all those partners, so I have a bit of concern about that. I mean, otherwise, they have a large number of employees, so they would have capacity to do the work. And then I did see with their proposal that they're willing to scale up as needed and adjust staffing as needed.
Debbie?
I agree with, what everybody said. Their proposal was hard to follow. I had to hunt, to see if there was information, and then I couldn't find it. I feel like, they missed an opportunity to provide a lot of the details that were needed. I appreciate Cheryl and Audrey's comments because, they're the subject matter experts and they know a lot more intuitively about these programs. But it shouldn't have been that difficult to try to go through this proposal. And I still don't have a comfort level that they could run this program from that proposal.
I agree. In fact, I don't know if you believe this, but it reminded me of reviewing the action plan a little bit and just trying to help structure it. Theirs was the one where they mentioned access to over 35,000 people. I think almost all of that is KPMG as a global firm. So that to me, I didn't really appreciate because it's not really truthful around who could do this work. Another thing I don't like to see is when they add up everyone's experience and they say over 220 years, like that doesn't mean anything. So I'm not saying they did that, but just as a rule, when they play that game, you just know they're grasping. So in terms of references, there were a lot, and most of them were for subs. I told you, I gave a review. I will say our action plan was approved first time, to their credit, the final product. That's a fair counter to the pain we went through to get there. Let me talk about some of the feedback on the other 7. I managed to reach 4. One was the other person who wasn't comfortable providing anything, and one I couldn't reach. So one was zeroing in on KPMG with Indelible as a sub. KPMG is like an EY, guys, in terms of, they're a big player in this space. He's calling the big 4, the big 6. The best, they got 5s across the board, KPMG did. And the positive there was knowledge of DR and the regulations. And one of the things as a constructive comment was they wanted to make sure more senior staff attended the key briefings. Sometimes they were absent, had to be pulled in, and then they came. Another was regarding the workforce group. These were mixed reviews, 3s and 4s and a 2. Good at damage assessments and cost estimates. And then there are possibly quality issues. This related to work in South Carolina related to accelerating housing construction and a phase of homes that were built. There were many quality issues and issues there. What was interesting, and I'm only saying this for what I heard, not because I vetted it, is my understanding is Workforce used to be a partner of Horn's, but Horn released them. And I don't know if they don't partner with them at all anymore or not, but that was a comment made that maybe bears more investigation by us. One related directly to Indelible, they got good scores and were cited as collaborative and team players, and I would agree with that. I do think their heart's in the right place. And then the last was funny. Lee was a reference for 3, so I did talk, not 2 hours, but I did talk to this person a little longer. And this was HGA they were commenting on, not Indelible. They got a mixture of, they got a 4 on structure and work, a 5 on communication, a 3 on knowledge, and a 4 on quality. Positive flexibility and willingness to do whatever it takes. That was a big door-to-door outreach campaign, and evidently they did a really nice job and really did a lot of lead work. And it was another case where sometimes it's hard for these reviewers to comment on the prime versus the sub because of the nature of communication channels and how they work together. So those were the references. So a big number got through to some. I had mine in the mix, but that's where we are on that. So any final thoughts on Delaware? Okay.
Okay, so that's our 7 initial discussion. Why don't we take another short break?
Mhm.
And then we'll come back and talk about next steps in the process.
Sounds good. Thanks.
So it's 10:37. We'll be back in about probably 10 minutes. Let's say 10:47. Okay, we will resume the evaluation meeting for RFP 25-00293. Also in the room with us now is Scott Stromer, Procurement Director.
Okay, so Ethan asked me to come in and just kind of give you some advice. So you have 7 proposals, I think you're looking at. Ethan went over how he scored pricing, because it's a tricky thing, because they all has different approaches, there are different hours, all of that. So Ethan can share how he arrived at that to try to get everybody to an apples to apples, and you can take a look at that, and you kind of deliberate on that. You may want time to look at it. The option you have also is to always, if you see there are gaps, you could do a best and final offer, right? So they could come back and they could update that if they need to. If you see that there are gaps to get them to an apples to apples, you could do that as well. So we can ask them, hey, we see this gap, we need this information from you, and get them all aligned now that we have now that you have more information. Now, they can't really add to their proposal, it really just be to refine it. We can kind of confine it a little bit. As for scoring, I understand that there may be 2 firms that you think are really on the lagging side. If you score, you're essentially shortlisting. And you're going to have to make a decision whether, okay, well, we're going to shortlist to 5 and not do, or 3 or 4. Understand that when you shortlist, when you go to interviews, those interviews are really to confirm that score here. So you don't have the benefit of talking to them and gleaning information. You're essentially scoring them without talking to them. So you may come to that meeting or to your interviews, and it doesn't happen a lot, but it can happen, where you go to that meeting and it may have just been a cut and paste exercise for somebody. They didn't really understand what they submitted. They couldn't answer the questions. So that may have been your number 1 firm. So now you have a problem, because now you've got to downgrade them or bring somebody up that you didn't interview. So it causes a little bit of a problem. So my advice is, because of everything's at stake, and this can essentially, I think it's what, 6-year marriage, right? I would really encourage you to interview the firms. And I understand there may be a couple that may not be to your standard. That's gonna shake out in the interviews. But everybody had an opportunity to talk, put their best foot forward. And then when you get done with those interviews, I would encourage you to take a couple days, because you can go back to because it'll be recorded, so you can go back and watch those. And if you had questions, because you may still have questions after that you need us to go to them to get answers. And then you meet again and say, okay, we have all the information we need. We've given them every opportunity. We've filled any gaps there may be. You can ask the questions at those interview sessions too, if you have questions. If Irma has questions about budget or whatever, they don't have to be predefined questions. Because remember, every proposal is different. There may be different gaps. Now, if there are some common things, if you do think you need to go to best and finals because you're not comfortable, or you see gaps in the costing, we can probably shore that up before those interviews. So it's 7. The difficult part is when you have 7, unless there's just a real clear line there, you're better off interviewing all of them, quite frankly. I will tell you, having gone through protest and look at vendors, there's a history there. So it's almost predictable. And I want to make sure that everyone had a fair opportunity. It's just a much easier case for me to make if you do that. So does this help at all?
Yes.
Okay. The last thing I want to say is, because this is so big, and it is such a long-term marriage that we're going to have with this firm, please, you have the time. Take the time you need to do it. Don't think that you have to rush this. I don't want you to rush it. It should be very deliberative. Debbie's been through these types of things. Cheryl's been through this. I mean, look at Oracle. I mean, they're very exhaustive processes because they're so important. And ultimately, it's gonna impact the residents and the quality of service they're gonna get. So we wanna make absolutely sure that it's the right firm. That's, because they're gonna be the key firm. And then the next bank that's gonna come out is gonna be the construction. And they're gonna have to interact with that firm and firms. So it's really, really important. So take the time. Please don't feel like you have to rush through it. And if you're just, I'm not there, let Ethan know. And it's your schedule. You drive this process. So we're here to assist you.
I have a question about the interviews. Is that where they make, for lack of a better word, like a dog and pony show, and then we ask questions from that?
Yep.
Or it's, okay,
Well-
strictly like an interview?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So typically what we'll do is we will send a letter out to them and we will, if, say it's an hour. We will give them X amount of, it's usually about 10 minutes. Give us your quick spiel on why you should be selected. Don't go back through your proposal because you guys have already been through it. You've read it. It's really honing in on why you should be selected and why you think you're the best firm. And then after that, you've got the rest of the time to ask questions and whatever you need from them. But we're very deliberate in our letter to them that, you know, we don't need to know, you know, where you went to high school. We don't need it. You know, why should you be selected? It should be very pithy, very concise, because your time is valuable, as is theirs, And we would also require, and this is, again, this is up to you. Don't let us drive that. We'll give you some advice, but we would also require who's the lead, who's the project manager, who's in charge, who's going to appear in front of the board. We want that person here. Because if they're stammering and hammering, they can't understand, they can't explain themselves, that's not going to go well. It needs to be the people that we are going to see on a day-to-day basis need to be here. We don't need the marketing people. We don't need the business development people. We need the folks that are actually going to manage this project for you. So that's who we want here. So it'd be those kind of instructions. But again, you can add to that. If there's other things you want to see, if you want to see the financial folks, we want to see, you know, how are you going to do this? How are you leveraging this or whatever? So it's up to you, and we'll make sure they're here. So that way, it's really about maintaining and appreciation for your time and the vendor's time. It's not endless. We got to get a decision because we do have a time, but at the same time, I want you to, when you walk away from the entire process, yep, that is definitely the best firm for us, and I feel good about it. And if you're ever asked by a board member or, you know, anybody else, you feel confident that you did everything you possibly could and you made the best decision. And you have very wide discretion in that decision. So as long as we can show that it's very deliberate, right?
We can require them to have a rep from each of their subs.
Sure. Yep, that's what you want. That's not a bad case. So
Rob, we've talked through all 7 proposals today, pros and cons. Kick it back to you. Do you want to follow that path? What do you think?
Yeah, I do. I think we should follow that path. It allows for us to say we were fair and equitable across the patch. Like you said, if we have any concerns, those will probably be reinforced, not the other way, or more positives. So yeah, let's go with that. And then we have the benefit of more insight into our final decisions. Okay. Is that okay, guys?
So in the meantime, Ethan can share, you know, the cost analysis, so you can take a look at that as well. I would encourage you to look at it here if you can. And if you see if there are gaps, I mean, Irma, Debbie are gonna probably pick up on that stuff of, wait a minute, the numbers aren't adding up for us. Let's make sure that it's all a fair analysis. So if we do need to shore that up, that is something we could always ask those vendors to be prepared to speak to or give us a written response right before you meet. So you always have that option as well. If you have certain things you want to see that maybe is global, we could certainly ask for them for that as well.
When you say talk about cost, Scott, do you mean in the same forum publicly, or do you mean something else?
No, you can do it here. Yeah, you can do it here. I mean, he can share with how he's come up with it. He could probably print out copies of how he arrived at that for each one. So you can see it and he can go through his methodology. Because obviously there's a lot of different tasks there. I'm not repeating myself, I know, but each of the firms probably has a different approach. They may be loading those tasks up with different stuff, right? So we're saying it's initial report, but they may be adding things, which is why it may be a little bit more expensive. So we're just trying to get to a bottom number so we can score it. We just want to make sure that as reasonable people look at that, it would be very fair, right? But I want you to have that benefit, but if you see something that's a little bit wonky or maybe a little bit askew, then let us know and we can have them shore that up. So you'd have that benefit too when you meet with them.
And that, would that also apply to costs that are, by comparison, a fraction of the other proposers?
You say that again?
So if one proposer came in at a fifth of everyone else,
Yeah.
relatively speaking.
Yeah, yeah.
Would that constitute a gap as you're describing it?
Well,
Because there's a feasibility
Sure,
check
sure.
that I think we'd want to do to say, how is that possible?
Right,
And
right.
because we do use that in scoring, it would seem
Yeah.
potentially unfair that that number just is so
Yeah.
artificially low.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that what I'm talking about is when you're looking at proposals and you're seeing, because there's probably some that are kind of in a, that's that old 80-20 thing, right? There's probably some that are pretty close. And so they have the appearance of being reasonable. I think it's between the proposals, when you look at the scoring, are they relatively loaded the same way? Is there an obvious gap there? So with the one that may be dramatically less at the 5 million or whatever it is, that's a good question to ask. Generally, it's like, how are you doing it for that? Explain your methodology. And that's what the interviews are looking at.
That would be a question we would want to know, because
Yeah.
we'd say, how could you possibly run a call center at that amount?
Now, you may find that after the interviews, you may say, you know what, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
At that point, you may say, you know what, I think we could do a best and finals after your interviews to kind of shore it up to say, listen, there's a gap there. So you have that opportunity. I don't like to do more than one best and final.
Mhm.
The good thing is we're still in that 30-day window, so we still have some protection under the law that it's not out there. And so you can do your work without any undue influence. But you have that opportunity.
Great. That's super helpful.
So,
Can you speak to how the evaluation will work following the interviews?
okay, sure. So Ethan mentioned consensus versus mathematical scoring. So I encourage consensus, and that's for a couple reasons. One is this process should be deliberative, right? So Debbie has knowledge that can inform somebody else. Irma clearly has knowledge. Cheryl has oodles of knowledge that can inform, may have experience with some of the firms. So the benefit of the consensus scoring is you're talking about it as a group collectively, and you just agree on the scores. If you want to do the mathematical exercise where you said, listen, we're just going to give our scores, you don't really have, put it this way, you can have the discussions, and then if you did your scores, theoretically, that'd be fine, I guess. You
And
just,
different, right? I know.
yeah, I mean, it's just a math problem at that point. Or you do the consensus. The nice thing, this is probably the most important, I like consensus scoring. Because some of you are going to be involved in this project. And I don't want to put you ever in a position, because when you do that scoring, your scores become public record, each one of you. And if one of you scores a firm low, and that is the firm that wins, it's like you didn't like us from the beginning anyway. So you're being a pill. So I'm trying to insulate you as well, right? Because you're not an individual here, you're a group. Not unlike, say, the Board of County Commissioners. It's a collective. They make decisions as a group. So you have that option. We did revise the policy that you do have the option. If you want to do mathematical scoring, where you do the average. I'd much rather probably see you do it the other way. But again, how you score and how you end up selecting, there just needs to be a basis for that. So when you score somebody low, there needs to be a good tracking of how you made those scores. It just needs to be reasonable, and it'll withstand the scrutiny. That it was a logical, reasonable. The reasonable people would see that and say, okay, yeah, I get that. And you can go right to the document and say, yeah, this is why. And that's where that summary that's done at the end that Rob will be charged with doing, which we'll probably encourage you, we'll work on that summary here. So when you leave this meeting, we already have the recommendation and we can go do what we need to do. So we're doing that as a group rather than, and so I'm trying to get Rob prepared as coming to the meeting, so you kind of have some of this meat that you're going to need. So does that help?
Yes.
Okay. It's an important decision. And I know you guys all have jobs doing other stuff, so, but this is really, really important. So,
And so we will try to expedite those orals to make sure we get them in before that 30-day expiration comes up. So if you're one of the 7 firms that we'll be talking to, expect a letter coming from me in the next coming days. I'll work with you to get your summary here, and then we'll draft that with the next steps in the process and the format that we're going to want the oral presentation. Maybe we'll give you X amount of minutes to present to us, as Scott mentioned. For cost, we can also discuss cost, and if we want to go back to them for that best and final offer. How I did the cost, we had some of our firms supply a 6-year cost because of the 3 years plus the potential for a 3-year renewal. We had other ones do a 3-year cost. I tried to calculate the best I could where it was clear that monthly or quarterly pricing was applied for those 6-year firms and bring them down to 3 to match the other firms. You brought up a great point, Debbie, of there were hours involved, that it's tough to assume if those hours are going to be front loaded, back loaded, where that would go. A best and final offer would give firms the ability to clarify on that, if we could actually describe exactly what we're looking for from them.
and you may glean some of the information you need from those interviews. Too.
Yes.
And say, okay, I see where they're going. Okay, well, this is how we need to get them all in line. And Debbie's, this is old hat for her to do that, so.
And some of the firms are very clear about their cost assumptions and others left it off.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
unfortunately, it's not apples to apples.
Yeah, because the way that was written is they can't supplement that. Either you identified your cost, there's no adding the cost after the award. So they kind of had to capture it there. It's the 4 corners of that. So I'll leave you so you can do your work here, but I would, if you do want additional information from the firms as part of the interviews, who you want at those interviews, let Ethan capture all that. So when you leave here, you give us the exact direction you want. So.
Okay.
Scott, one final question.
Yeah.
So if an agency or firm decides not to partake in the interview process, are they automatically eliminated, or they stay in the?
Yeah, I mean,
It's assumed, but
yeah, no, if we require an interview, that's, I have to think about that. I mean, they would obviously, without the benefit of that interview,
Wouldn't help them.
no, it's not gonna go well.
No, I know, I just wanted, just for the sake of our discussion, know how that plays out in a
Yeah.
very formal
Yeah.
process that you have.
So the committee is required to meet in person. However, we'll do these, they can do them remotely, so. And we'll
So we should,
schedule,
yeah.
yeah, it should be. And I think you'll probably have to do it over a couple days.
I was thinking
So it's comfortable.
the 30 days is
Yeah.
we're already in that window, so
Yeah.
that's why I was wondering if they decided not to, are they still on the table for consideration?
Well, I think they would be. I mean, I guess if everybody bailed and only one was left, I mean, you'd have to, That's never happened before. But yeah, don't be concerned, too much. I'm just saying we have that 30 days just to give you time. We go over those 30 days all the time.
Okay.
So they still can't change them. What ends up happening is that the code of silence is still in place. The sunshine law is still in place, and nobody's be able to talk to anybody. So you're still able to do your work. It just means that they can start requesting this stuff and, but there's still protections when they do those interviews, who can sit in those interviews, you can't have competitors sitting there. We can either record them, there's all kinds of things we can do, so. So don't be worried. If it takes longer than that, it takes longer.
Okay, thank you.
I can't stress that enough, that just take the time you need. Because I recognize too, we recognize we have other jobs, there's other things going on, you're trying to have to reprioritize everything to get through this, and this is important. And just encourage you, there's 2 more right after this.
These guys did incredible work. They had about 1,400 pages to go through in about 10 days.
It's a lot,
So
it's a lot. And again, it's also just out of respect for the vendors who, it takes a lot of time and money to prepare these things.
It does.
So out of respect for them, please take the time you need to review what they did, just don't phone it in. So that's why this is probably one of the highest qualified committees. This is probably the largest we've ever had. But you've all been selected for, by administration, executive team, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay, thank you. If you need me, let me know.
appreciate it, Scott. Thank you.
You know where I live.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Okay, so let's talk through next steps. We want to go to orals. What do you think? We can decide this offline, but we can also do right now 10 minutes, 15 minutes for them to provide their initial presentation.
I'm thinking what Scott said is fine. 10 minutes that each of us picks one question because it just will run out of time if we each have two or three. And some of ours may shift, right? Cheryl may ask a question I thought of. But maybe each of us has our key questions. Maybe some of us won't have any. I don't know. But just in terms of if we're going to do an hour, that leaves 50 minutes. Just want to be conscious of the fact that I don't want to leave anyone out. So if everyone had two or three, we get to three people, it'll be done. Does that work for you guys, just as a going in position? I think we do them as soon as we can.
Yep.
Because it's also fresh in our minds. We wait a couple of weeks. I'd rather just knock these out, guys. I think the way we do that is they join by teams, right? But we congregate like we're doing here. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Yeah, so,
And then we'll set up a separate meeting after that to discuss scoring. We'll probably give you guys 24, 48 hours to kind of ruminate and think about what you heard in the orals and then go into that.
you guys think we need more than an hour? Do you want to do an hour and 15 with just some spillover, just in case?
An hour
It's still
for all seven?
No, for each one, an hour and 15. So maybe 10 to 15 for an intro, then we have a full hour. I think maybe what's the cost to us is nominal, but it's maybe one more question being answered. What do you think?
Well, and some may be shorter too,
Yeah, we just don't
so we
know.
don't know, so I think that's fair to.
So book an hour and 15 minutes.
And then give us.
Can we do that?
Yep.
Five
You can do
minutes,
whatever you
10
like.
Let's do that, because this is a big deal, and if it just, I just wouldn't want us to
Okay,
have to
schedule.
start packing in the last few minutes.
They'll get that full time and then they would just,
Okay.
they'd be cut off.
Right, so 10 to 15 for the pitch, an hour for each of us to ask questions, and there may be some follow-ups that we get an answer we don't understand. Okay, good.
And if you're one of the firms, the letter you receive will directly detail what that is. If it's 15 minutes plus an hour, those will be the cutoff times, but you'll have that full amount of time to answer questions.
Sounds good.
Let's see what else. Cost, I think that's something we can work through of how we want to request a best and final offer from them. Of what exactly we're looking for, the estimated number of hours that we're expecting to have to work on this and those other things. As you mentioned, Debbie, there was some major variation in the way they presented that.
Yes,
And so I think we can clarify what we're looking for.
so we can do that after, not right now.
We don't need to go into specifics because there's
Right.
a lot of task deliverables to break down, but you and I
Right.
can converse on that.
Okay, okay. Now, did you say for the letter, we need some summary of today, or can we just get those booked without waiting for some summary?
We can get those.
Okay.
We don't have to post any summary or anything of today's meeting. It's all recorded, of course.
Yes,
I'm thinking, it's the 26th here. Maybe the week of what would that be, the week of the 6th? So not next week, but the week after would maybe be the time we try to aim for these presentations. We can check on your guys' calendars and see what days work, but we're trying to get this done within a relatively quick time. We could push out another week if we wanted to, but
just to be devil's advocate, why couldn't
Yeah,
Why couldn't we start like Wednesday next week on the 1st? I'm guessing the firm's gonna make their people available, so that probably won't be the issue. But I'd rather start next week. What about you guys? I mean, it's not, and we can chunk it up so our schedules can accommodate it.
we can talk about that. By the time we get these letters out to them, it'll probably be Monday.
Sorry, go ahead.
And then do they have time to put together a quick presentation there in 2 days?
That's what I was gonna ask. Have the firm's been made aware that this is an option? And if they haven't, or if they have, is there a certain amount of time that you'd recommend giving them to kind of put something?
It's in our terms and conditions that we can, of course, request for presentations. Generally, I like to give 7 to 10 business days to get the presentations ready, but.
Can I throw down some point here? These guys are experts. They should be able to show up with a day or two of prep. We used to do it consulting all the time. They know what they're talking about. This should be packaged materials they've already used before. They just need to tweak. They've already done the proposal. They're gonna be pulling points from that anyway. And I kind of like to see how nimble they are, to be honest. That's just my counterpoint.
That's a fair comment. And the office
This week
is,
definitely works better for me than the following week. I'm
Next week
checking my
works.
calendar following.
I think if we stretch out the end to end, that gives us flexibility. Have one on one day, two on another.
Second. Just have something midday that I can't.
we would need you guys here in person.
Okay.
So
That's a rule. That was my next question.
we would need the committee in person, firms can be virtual.
We're not gonna do this all in one day, though. It has to be
I
separate.
can do.
2
I
days,
can
I
do, But,
Or three.
really the third, I got a hard stop at about 2.
Yeah, I can make any day except the 10th and the 13th of October.
So
Okay.
can we shoot for the Thursday, or Friday next week?
Yes,
Just,
and
Yeah.
Well,
And
could
we
probably
can-
knock them out.
And we can dive into each of our schedules after
we
this to
start
see
at,
what
like-
cutoff times would be.
Right, no, in principle, we're gonna try to accelerate a little bit.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That works.
You
Eight.
could start at 8.
A
We
week
start
started.
at 8, all day on
Friday.
Thursday,
We
come
should be
back
done.
Friday.
You can bring me coffee, right?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say,
Give
Ethan's
me
got the
coffee.
coffee and the donut.
I don't even drink coffee, but I'll start doing it.
Are we gonna, I think, are we gonna ask who we would like to be present, as in Scott mentioned, like we would like.
That'll be in the letter,
The main lead, the whoever. Oh, it'll be-
I think we would want a rep from each sub in case our question pertains to their area, right? When we, and they're gonna be,
Right.
some of these subs are bigger than the primes in some respects.
Right, and so you may want to have actual program people that, involved. in
It's
that.
teams, they can have. their-
Yeah, it's easy on their end.
So here's the thing, be prepared to respond to the questions around what we need. And it's a team's meeting, they can have anybody there.
Exactly.
Correct.
If there's specific people we want to request, we can do that, but,
They would be well advised to do that anyway.
and the firms will, obviously, the other firms will not be watching each of the presentations, it'll be individual.
Right.
And then the recordings will be shared after that.
But they're listening to this conversation.
Yeah,
They are,
Yes,
yes.
yes,
they're all lovely people.
yes.
Okay. Is there anything else?
I think we're good with that game plan.
I think we are.
Yep, if you're one of the firms, be looking for a letter here shortly with more information and specifics on what we're looking for. That's all. It's gonna be able to allow you guys to have a conversation. That's very important. Anything else, guys?
No, just thank you to everyone online
Yes.
and thank you to you guys for making the time.
Okay, we'll go ahead
That's a
and,
lot.
yes, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you all. Let's conclude the evaluation meeting for RFP 25-00293. Have a great day.
And you think you'll block our schedule too?